Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to On the House, the Household Management Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Yastra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's begin.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Now, as you can see from the title, we're focusing on the topic of fertility and how that is taken on the approach in nutrition. Our guest today is an accredited dietitian, nutritionist, and researcher. A lot of her research looks into how to improve different health areas from PCOS, endometriosis to fertility, while also the director of Womanly Nutrition and Dietetics, based in Melbourne. She is joining me in the studio today, Dr. Stephanie Pirotta. Thank you so much for joining me, Stephanie.
Oh, thanks so much, Tina. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, it's great to have you in the studio today.
Yes.
We don't really have a lot of in-studio shows. So when we come in, we're just like, it's so much better to come in and get this done.
I could not agree more. As soon as there was that option, I was like, yes, I'm coming in. And also it's kind of cool to be in a studio. I'm normally, not in a studio. So this is not my life. So I was like, oh, this would be cool to come in. Yeah.
And it is great weather to do it as well, where it's not like hot, where you're having to worry about the layers that you have to take off and everything and still look professional.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, so it is. It's a bit of a treat, I must admit, to me as well today. Yeah.
So women's health is a really big topic and there's so much that sort of goes into it. And I think I told you a little bit before we started recording is the fact that I never really gave it a huge focus in my life until I turned about 25. And it's been a year of me sort of going through an understanding into it, but there's so much to learn and so much that a lot of us, not just women's health, but in total aren't really told about in our mid-20s and what to look out for. It's more like avoid all this when you turn 30 because that's what's going to affect you. But there's so much prep work that sort of goes into that as well.
Yeah, I think when people think women's health, they think fertility, but it's just so much more than just fertility, to be honest. It's more about understanding your health. I mean, maybe from a woman's perspective or people who menstruate is what does menstruation look like? How do my hormones affect that? What is a healthy menstruation cycle? What does that actually, should that be? What's happening during that time? How is that affecting my body? Most of the time not actually educated about that. I think that's getting much better in schools, but we should have much more awareness of that. And then the fertility side comes in. So it's like, okay, well, now I understand all of that background from a fertility perspective, what does healthy fertility look like, or what should I be doing for fertility? When should I be having sex, or when is the best time, when am I ovulating?
Yeah.
All these things from my experience when working with couples, they don't really know that much about it. So even a sex education sometimes is really important just as a basic. But yeah, I think it's really it's important because not only do you understand, how we feel and what our body requirements are, even from an emotional state, it's really important for us to understand what's going on, but also just as an empowerment thing, I think is really important. And just as women should know enough or have a good understanding of men's health, men should also have a good understanding of women's health because we live in a society where, our population, we live together.
Yeah.
And so it's important to understand each other's needs, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think when we're taught in schools, I can understand sort of not knowing the other side to it in a school because that's still at an age where you're focusing on your own health. But when you get older, there's a lot about men's health that I didn't know existed. I thought they just sort of, nothing happened with them because you're not really shown the fact that a lot of happen. And also on the men's side, I have a lot of guy friends who are also like, they never learned like what menstruation is and all of that until they got a girlfriend and they realized they had to go through that process because families don't talk about it.
Yeah, it's very taboo.
Yeah, I'm very privileged the fact that like my dad is very knowledgeable about it. Like he goes and get pads, he goes and get like tampons, anything that we need. And he's not afraid to do that, which is something that I think is a good thing that is changing in today's day and age, is like the fact that we are able to really not find this something to be embarrassed about.
No way. Absolutely.
Like going in high school, I used to be so embarrassed about going to like standing in the pad section of the supermarket and trying to figure out which one I wanted. And everyone that came by, I'm like, oh no, they
How
know.
embarrassing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But as you get older, like there are men standing there too. There's like everyone standing there and just looking and just trying to figure out for themselves as well. And sometimes you have really good conversations with people on it and they give advice, you give advice. So it's like, there's a lot more of a harmonious touch to it than there used to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think as well there's an increase in understanding around, women's health and what we need for during the menstruation time. But I also think there's been an increase in conversation from a way of how menstrual products can help from an environmental perspective, and I think that's also helped with it. So, the biodegradable side of things, I mean, it's definitely not my area of expertise, but I think that's helped a lot with the conversation. Can you look at the menstrual cup, for example? That's kind of come in, should we use pads? Should we use tampons? And also things like pelvic health and pain and how that might impact pain for some people as well. And I think there's just been a bit more of an awareness, and that as well has allowed for more conversations and more men to understand. I definitely agree with, once you've started having a partner. I remember now we're married now, but back in the day when I started going out with my then boyfriend, he was all icky and was like, oh, it's a period. I'm like, well, we're dating and it's going to happen to me every month. And so more than 50% of the population is women. So if you want to go out with me, then you have to understand all of me. That includes that. So
yeah. That's a good thing to sort of
deal with it, like it's
that's
good
in the
for
contract. You have to accept that.
But I think that there's a bit more awareness. I think, especially in the newer generation, there's a lot more understanding and open conversation about it, which I think is so healthy and important for, open conversation in future and next generations, and just even just empowerment and equal opportunities for everyone.
No,
going
I agree.
forward.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great change. And I wanted to know how you sort of got into women's health and wanting to help a lot of women understand their own body and probably try to not diagnose, but I think also just try to implement a lot of the things that they've read online and see, okay, if that works with them. I mean, when it comes to PCOS and endometriosis, you don't really hear those terms unless you hear someone else who's dealing with it and see their symptoms. So
Totally.
How did you get started into it?
Well, it's been a bit of a journey. I'm now 33 and I started I finished my dietetics. When was it? I don't know, over about 10 years ago. But I suppose, I did my dietetics degree and then I went into honours and I did my, I was working clinically as well during that time, and I've always been in research. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I did always have a bit of a passion for women's health, even when that was like a block during dietetics and placement. I think that was like really where my passion lied. Then as I started kind of working in clinical space, I realized there was a real gap, and I was getting a lot of referrals for, at that time I didn't really know what it was, but polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS, and I was getting a lot of GP referrals for weight loss. And then in their history, there would be PCOS. And so there's different types of PCOS, but one of the main things is insulin resistance, and insulin resistance in people with PCOS can lead to easy weight gain. In most people, not everyone PCOS, but in most people. And I realized then there was actually, first of all, not really a lot of lifestyle recommendations, let alone nutrition recommendations for PCOS management. But there was so many more things other than weight loss in a relationship with food, maybe emotional kind of considerations, things like hormonal regulation, other things are a bit more kind of deep to understand what was going on. At the same time, because I was in research, I was like, I think I'm a bit like mentally bored now because I've been doing this for 2 years. So I applied for a PhD, and I got that through Monash Uni, and wanted to fill a space basically. So that kind of happened. And at the same time, I was also having a lot of people close to me also being diagnosed with PCOS. So I saw their journey and maybe the misinformation or even lack of information that was being provided to people being diagnosed. So I ended up doing my PhD in polycystic ovary syndrome and the lifestyle management of that at Monash University and the hospital there. At the same time, since I was a teenager, really, I've always experienced quite bad pelvic pain. I don't anymore, but I've always thought that maybe that's probably not the best thing that I should be having. There's always been a lot of pain. Sometimes even I went to a Catholic girls' school, and I sometimes had to go home because I was so much in pain every month.
Yeah.
And obviously that impacts quality of life. And so as I started working with did my studies, but also been always working with women with PCOS or people with PCOS, there was a kind of an overlap even with pelvic pain. I started seeing a lot of people with endometriosis as well, and you can have both endo and PCOS at the same time. There is an increased risk of each of those. And so I suppose a lot of people say they fall into something, but I suppose I did fall into it, but I had a personal experience with pelvic pain. I always knew, I suspected I had endometriosis. And then a few years ago, I did the surgery, got diagnosed, and really for me it was life-changing overnight. But I felt that was really nice because that gave me a lot of empowerment, a lot of understanding of my body. I realized, I knew from my studies about women and my menstrual cycle, etc. I had made my own changes from a nutrition and lifestyle perspective, and that helped to improve my quality of life immensely. And so it was such a privilege to help other people, provide individualized, evidence-based nutritional lifestyle care for people with endo, PCOS. Both of those conditions can impact fertility. It doesn't always mean that they'll have fertility issues, people who have those conditions, but it can. So that kind of popped up as well. And then as a side note, a lot of kind of eating or disordered eating can come with those conditions because food can impact symptoms. And so people sometimes, from my experience, tend to over-restrict certain foods. And to be honest, there's a lot of crap on the social media. So, all these dietary trends or whatever. So that also kind of gave me a bit of a passion for now an accredited eating disorder dietitian. So I do see people with disordered eating or eating disorders with those conditions because it can really impact mental health and relationship with food. And so that's kind of where my journey came about. So I do have definitely a personal experience. I don't have PCOS. I do have endometriosis, and that kind of, as I said, for me, I had surgery and made lifestyle changes, and that was really life-changing. Some people don't have the journey as easy. They, sometimes you have surgery, you need to do it a few times. Ideally not. There's just the one surgery and it's all done. Some people don't need surgery and they can just manage it with all different other strategies. It really depends on the person. But yeah, that's how I came about. And, once you start, getting emails and praise from other people that you're working with to say, I've fallen pregnant, or my pain has really gone away, or I'm no longer bloated anymore, or, I've just really I have an understanding now. Well, thank you so much for educating me about the condition that I have or my menstrual cycle. It just, you can see there's so much more autonomy in the person and drive to really understand why they're making certain changes. And ideally with education, that person is then able to make certain changes and go on without me or without the healthcare professional. Because ideally, I love seeing people, but ideally they're self-managing. That's where we want people to be. And just improving their overall happiness and quality of life is really where the main aim, basically. So, yeah.
Well, that's a long journey to sort of go and discover. I mean, you quite literally fell into it because there's so much that you dealt with and have personal experience did. It's amazing to see a lot of people who do sort of, when we're talking about issues like this and topics like this, to see the connection that they really started their own journey with. And it's usually from their first hand perspective and their first sort of understanding it on themselves. And it is like, I agree with the social media and the self-diagnosis thing that comes along, because I know a lot of friends who do like self-diagnose themselves when it comes to these issues, mainly because I think a lot of people are scared to go to a doctor and scared to actually people to admit and tell them that this is what's happening. And especially as I'm getting older, there's that whole idea of, okay, I've got to really think about this. I've got to really understand it. But I'm also really scared to figure it out. I think like one of the main things for me is like I got in the letter for, I think, checking the one that you have to do by the time you turn 25. I forgot what that.
Yep, the cervical screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I got that letter. Didn't do it last year. I was supposed to. Got too scared to do it, so I never booked it. But now it's like, okay, I probably do have to book it now. So it becomes, I think, more out of fear, the fact that a lot of people don't want to go ahead and look into it. And I know they say knowledge is power. And I know my mom and my sister have both told me that. But I think at the same time, there's that fear of like, okay, how much of my life do I have to change?
Yep, and people ready to make that change. Yeah,
yes.
There's definitely a vulnerability side of it, and I can definitely agree with you in terms of, you know, again, personal experience and also working with people, that you go to a health professional, most of the time it's a GP, and not all the time. And again, it's improving a lot. And I must admit, GPs are amazing and they need to know everything. You know what I mean? They're a general practitioner and that can be really hard. And they're always getting people, you know, telling them about medications and different guidelines, and they're kind of swamped all the time, and how the system's gone, you know, they're very, very overwhelmed. So we have to also take into account of that. You know, but there is also this it does happen where someone goes to their GP and they're not really listened to, or kind of fobbed off and told that they may be in pain and told to take painkillers and no other kind of anything else is done. And most of the time you need to go to a few GPs to actually get a diagnosis and referrals actually, you know, happening. So that's exhausting and can make you feel like you're imagining things and, you know, so there's definitely that. But there is also then, it's scary to be diagnosed with a condition. It's scary to be like, oh, what does that mean? And I think there's, as I said, there's this from endo and PCOS, a lot of people think those conditions equate to infertility or, with PCOS that they might get diabetes or whatever and it's going to be so bad, but it's completely not like that. You know, so there's just kind of this exaggeration, I think, and social media can be so amazing and so powerful, but just as equally there can be so much misinformation out there. So just understanding who to follow, how to take that information. Even if a paper was published, awesome, but there's even evidence of what that paper is, you know, is it cross-sectional, is it a randomized control trial, is it a systematic review, even that, you know, just because it published doesn't mean it's a good study. You need to take into context, and that's in the published, you know, evidence-based form. So imagine on people's social media. So social media is such a great place to get information, but it can be also, a lot of misinformation, very confusing, especially from a nutrition perspective, because even, you know, one day coffee's good, the other day coffee's bad, and like, I don't know, cheese is bad, and then next day cheese is good, eggs, potatoes, like all these things. So it's, you know, how media also portrays studies coming out can be, they have like snippet bites, you know, and they don't tell you the full story or the full context.
So it's one person's point of view as well. Like I've realized that a lot of the symptoms that someone experiences can be one thing, but also if you experience the same thing, doesn't mean you have the same thing.
Yes. Oh, I love that you said that, Dina. So yes, and there's a lot of kind of Facebook support groups which are amazing, and can be really good. And not even just Facebook, but just general support groups. I mean, endo and PCOS is becoming a lot more common now. And so again, wonderful to have people around you who understand what you're going through and who can share symptoms. But these conditions, just like any other chronic condition, presents very differently in every individual body. And so what might work treatment or management for someone might be very different, have a different effects for someone else. So it's really important to see someone for that individualized evidence-based therapy and someone who's a health professional who is in that space. So going back to kind of the GPs, it's important to go back to first of all, yes, to see a GP, but maybe to see a GP who, you know, in this context is maybe more women's health focused, maybe at a women's health clinic, maybe they actually specialize in this area. It's not just kind of like their side specialty, but they see everything else, and they include women's health in their bio. They're actually women's health GP, because you're much more likely to be heard, actually be understood. They know about the conditions that you might be presenting with. The time to diagnoses and management is way less. So, you know, your symptoms might not be as progressed. over time, actually the cost might be even reduced because it hasn't progressed as much. And you feel a lot more heard. That patient, that GP or health professional to person relationship is actually so important, you know. So I think when it comes to a GP or any other health professional, gynecologist, dietitian, a physiotherapist, whoever it is, you need to make sure that they're specializing in what you are presenting with and what you need, to make sure that they have those skills, because we're human and not everyone can understand everything, you know. So
like there's specialized areas for that people practice for a reason, to be able to like focus on them. Now, thank you so much for that introduction. Before we get deeper into it, I love to get to know some of your interests and maybe some recommendations by playing a little icebreaker to hopefully get us started.
Okay.
So to start off with, do you have a favorite book that you could share with us?
Okay. So must admit I made some notes for this. Which is a bit silly, but I don't really have a favorite anything, I must admit. Okay, I'm not someone who does that, but I do have a few things. So this is going to be a bit cliche and maybe also show my age, but I've never had the same enjoyment out of a book as of the Harry Potter series, because I grew up with the Harry Potter series. Like I was the age of Harry Potter, so every year it came out. So the anticipation and reading it, that I've never experienced that again in any book. So for me, if anyone says what's your favorite book, it's Goblet of Fire. It's the Harry Potter series, but Goblet of Fire. I found was their best because it was all like, you know, games and all that stuff. So, and there was a bit of romance in it. So that was it. But then I suppose at the moment, I'm reading The Body Keeps a Score, which is kind of a famous book, but it's all about trauma and how the body holds trauma and can show trauma, and I very much recommend people. It's, to be honest, it's not a light read. It's more like a textbook, but I love that. And that's what I'm having. But there's also another book that I just ordered. It's called Yellow Face.
It's on my read list. It's on my to be read list. It's like staring at me at the face.
It just arrived yesterday, so I was like, oh yeah, but I have like a whole column of books to read before that. But I've had a few recommendations.
Apparently it's really good.
There's,
I think the moment I bought it at the store, the person that was selling it, she was like, I just finished it, and I think that if you like the other books that you have on the list, then you'll like this one. So it's amazing. I agree with the Harry Potter series. That is a series that I feel like I can go ahead and still be a child with. Like I read it quite often. I didn't actually read it until I was probably in my early 20s because I don't think I think in high school I was very much into the Twilight series when it came out, but Harry Potter very much came in when I was about 20, 21 just reading through that. And it was, I think my favorite was Order of the Phoenix, mainly because I love the change in character development between all of them.
It became dark as well a little bit then.
And that's my favorite movie as well. That's probably why I started it. But I agree with the Harry Potter series. I can definitely see why that's far up there. And nothing can be replaced.
Nothing can be replaced. That, like, the joy of it. The anticipation of lining up to when the next book came out and all that stuff. Oh,
I can't even imagine that. That would have been amazing too.
Yeah, it was awesome.
To be able.
I'm not gonna lie, it was awesome.
So when it comes to movies, do you have a movie that you've recently watched?
So I've, again, don't have a favorite one, but I have recently watched my husband's Irish, so we have a few Irish things. But there's one called, last night actually we watched The Land of Saints and Sinners, and it's a 2023 movie, and it basically is about, you know, the conflict between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and it's based in Donegal, which is kind of on the borderline. And it shows you kind of maybe a more personalised story between the two sides of it. So, you know, there's been a lot of, it's an 800-year history there. So, talk about trauma, that's absolutely it. But, that it was actually really good. Because you showed it was different sides of the story, which was kind of nice.
Okay. So what was the name of that again?
It's called The Land of Saints and Sinners.
I'm making a note of that.
And it's got like Liam Neeson in it, Jack Gleeson.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, all the big actors.
All the big Irish actors are in there.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Then it shows you how like the secrecy of people who are in each side and you would never know who was kind of fighting for. Yeah. And even though they're in the same town. It was nice. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a really good movie.
Yeah.
I am really annoyed the fact that I didn't go to Ireland when I was in the UK for a little bit.
Yeah.
I was there for about 3 weeks. I could have done it, but at the same time, because I didn't plan ahead and doing that, I was either Wales or Ireland I really wanted to go see. Wales, I think mainly because they had a book town that I want to go see.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So the whole town is just all bookstores.
Oh my gosh,
like
I
a whole
had no
street.
idea.
It's amazing.
Yes, that's amazing.
So I'm like, oh, okay, that has to be on the list. And then I didn't get a chance to do that. But yeah, I love the history that UK and Ireland and Wales, like all of them really have, because it's so much deeper than on Australia, I think. It goes so far back. There's so much hurt that happens between everything that you don't really get to see unless you see it in a movie probably 800 years later.
Yes, yeah.
So
it's quite deep rooted.
Yeah. I'm going to make a note of that because I think my dad would also like to watch that. So I'm going to
I started talking with my husband and he's like, let's not get into this. It's like way deeper than this. I was like, fair enough.
You have to have the whole day free to like really go through it.
Yeah, I don't think in the end there'll be a resolution, but even, but it's a good movie. Different side of things.
Definitely make a note of that. So thank you for that. Now when it comes to podcast, do you have a podcast that you listen to?
Yeah. So again, no one. I must admit my podcasts that I normally read are probably like nutrition and lifestyle based, but recently I'm like, I need more balance in my life. So I've kind of signed up to a few other ones. The one that I probably started with, I only recently got into podcasts to be honest, because I was like mental overload, but now I find it lovely. The first one was The Proof by Simon Hill. So that's very like evidence based and he gets like professors on or research people come on and they talk all the different types of nutrition and exercise science basically. And they break it down. So that's the first one, but I'm still listening to that, but I've moved on a little bit. One of them that I love is by the ABC, All in the Mind. So I just I love that. That's a popular one. Yeah. Another one that I recently added on was the XYZ Experiment, which is actually my kind of boss mentor, and her and a few other people have this podcast, and they just talk about random things, like the randomest of topics, and they get people in. So I thought that was like nice, a bit different. And then there is one that actually I think they've just finished their latest series, but it's an Irish one by the BBC. It's called Now You're Asking with Marion Keyes and Tara Flynn. And so they get people kind of calling in and literally it could be anything, but it's all these random questions and then they talk about themselves and it's very lighthearted. It's really nice. So, but otherwise there's other ones that are just kind of like very nutrition based or that are really good to listen to, but sometimes like I just need a break, so I listen to these as well.
You found a good balance, I would say, like in different areas. One that has you don't even have to focus on at all. Some that are a little bit more like unhinged, I would say. Yes. And some that are a little bit more focused on some areas, which I think you found a balance.
It just depends on my mood. What can I handle? Do I need to de-stress or can I take some more information in? Basically.
And something that's not as deep as well sometimes. Because I think like podcasts, they can range from very, very deep to something that you're just like, why am I even listening to this?
Yeah. I started listening to one, I think it's called, anyway, it was one on mental health and I was like, you know what? I can't do this. This is just too heavy as my side thing on podcasts. It's too much. So too draining, you know.
Especially because I do podcasts for a living. My brain is like suddenly like, oh, that means I have to do research on a podcast. And so now I'm just listening to something that's completely, I don't even have to think about it. True crime is probably one of my
I love
common.
Oh, true crime. One of my closest friends are really into it. I'm like, how do you listen to this? Like, don't you get scared?
I go to sleep listening to them. So I have headphones on, I'm just lying in bed and I fall asleep.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I'm definitely not like that. There is also, I was going to recommend another one, but it's just gone through my head. Nope, it's gone.
It'll come back in the most random time. You can always email it to me.
Yeah, thanks.
So either in your professional or personal life, do you have a person that you also find yourself looking up to?
So I did think about this because I was like, depends on, my personal life, I suppose, I mean, cliche, but my mum, I think, for my personal life, because she, mum and dad grew up in Malta. I'm first generation Australian. They came thinking that they're just going to do their master's here in engineering, but mum was actually pregnant with me. So the whole thing, I mean, looking back was just like, wow, they didn't have any support here. And I mean, that's very brave, you know. And
very minimal conversing with people from other countries as well, which makes it even more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely knew English. Like it's a very English speaking country. Yeah, but they didn't have that support. You know what I mean? So and coming with expecting a baby from my mum's perspective is I can't even imagine. Just even dealing with the healthcare system and lack of support and things like that. So not knowing how to do everything. So that she is, and she's, you know, really dedicated to the family, but she's also very you know, she's done very well in her career at the same time. So, and then she's like amazing at gardening. Like literally, she calls them her ICU plants because she goes to the nursery and buys everything that's about to die, and then she they flourish, and their garden is like amazing, and they have, you know, all these fruit and veggies and flowers and roses everywhere. It's everything she touches is like
foster plants. Yeah,
so she's really good at many things, and drawing, and I can't do. She's like grade 6 in piano, so she's good at really a lot of things. So anyway, so yes, I'm multi-talented. Biased, but I was like, I can't do that, and she cooks very well. So anyway, so from a personal perspective, you know, the hardship, I suppose I look at that as hardship and love. So that. From a research perspective, I do have a couple of people. So the head of my unit is Professor Helen Skoteris, and she is amazing. She has, you know, she's a professor. She also balances family life. She's so kind. Her background is childhood psychology, and she just really nourishes people and promotes women and men in her team to grow from a research perspective, whilst being loving and firm. So, you know, from a research perspective, it's nice to have someone who's senior, and she just cultivates your writing and grants, and she's definitely a leader. You know, she allows you to grow, which is lovely. So she's then there's also another woman, same unit actually, Dr. Dashini Aiden. She's in aged care really, but she's kind of she actually is in the XYZ experiment. But she's so lovely as well. She's very, you know, very encouraging, and she's maybe a bit more practical. So I suppose, but day to day, they're not people super well known, but they're people that I kind of look up with and have a lot of guidance. There's also someone called Professor Jacqueline Boyle, who's again under Monash, but she does she's gynecologist, obstetrician, and also researcher. And she's lovely as well, and she's helping with a couple of projects. And it's just so nice to see women, you know, balance female roles maybe in a research space, because it can be quite difficult. So
I know, and to have that support as well, the guidance that's sort of there, like their work also inspires a lot of what you do, and has a lot of connections as well, to sort of like, okay, if they can't figure things out, they'll know someone who does, or to have that connection. It's like women supporting women in such a great environment. It sounds like.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is lovely.
Great role models.
Yeah, it's good.
Now, I hope you're all warmed up for the deeper questions that we're hopefully going to get into today.
Deeper questions.
So everyone has a very different view as to what household management is, and what managing a household is supposed to look like, and what it does look like, and the reality of it. So how would you go ahead and define what household management is to you?
Yes. Okay. So when I first saw this question, I was like, what? I've never even heard of this before. And so I kind of had to go away and come back and think about it. So I'm going to say it from my lens. Okay. I suppose I didn't really look up anything formal, but this is what I think.
Okay.
I think it's more the systems or the procedures or structures put in place to best allow a family unit or a house unit, however that's defined, to flourish in a way that's going to allows for the most efficient and best outcomes in relation to different things. So maybe finances or health outcomes, or daily management of like cleaning, or, you know, things are of the house, you know, to allow for things to be well managed and balanced, equal, greater opportunity between all people in the house. That can be a family, or maybe that's a share house. I'm not too sure what that means, but you know, that's what I think it is. And then from a obviously health perspective, I'm looking how can everyone how a household kind of runs. How can someone best optimize their own health and well-being with what they do, or what systems are put in place to allow for best individualized health for each. As we said before, everyone has individualized health needs. But together, how can they, work together to support each other and live in a health promoting environment?
I think you've pretty much nailed exactly what I thought.
Yeah, good.
I didn't actually search that question up either, because I sort of because I know that everyone has a different response to that. It's not something that is clinically done, especially because households are all different. Like you said, it's just a family or shared house, or you could live on your own and still be considered a household. And like, I definitely see it similar to you, like the way that things that are in place in order to make sure that you can live comfortably, whether it's like the bills are paid, or food is made, groceries are bought, like small little things that take place within a 4x4 area that allow you and people that live inside of it to live safely and comfortably.
Yep, and hopefully flourish. You don't want to be, you want to be thriving, not surviving.
Yes.
I think is the best.
We promote that. That should be the tagline for today. Thriving, not surviving. I'm changing the title of the show now. Because I think we sort of neglect that pretty easily. Like we think about like household, we think of the family, we think of the people in it. We don't think about the house. We don't think about this environment that we live in. I think environment is just as important.
Absolutely.
And it's probably the most neglected. I know from my perspective is definitely the most neglected. I mean, the amount of piles of laundry that I probably have to put away now is incredible. Like the mental health space that sort of allows you to thrive and to be the most focused that you can be. And we know from experience you can't be focused in a cluttered area.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I kind of see it's very similar to you. Yeah,
Dina, I'm glad.
It's good.
I'm glad.
We're on the right track.
Yes,
well,
good,
we hope.
good.
It's like the blind leading the blind here right now, but we hope we're on the right track.
And hopefully listeners are on the right track. Maybe that's what they thought.
If you do have your definition, please leave it down in the comments and then we'll go through that. So when it comes to nutrition, how does that play a crucial role in fertility?
Oh, such a deep question that we can go through for a long time.
Yep.
Yes, I'll summarize it. So first of all, what is preconception? Okay, even in literature that's debated. Okay, how long do you go? Is it when people are trying to conceive? Is it when someone if someone's accidentally fallen pregnant, like when does that start? Because 50% of pregnancies are unplanned, Yeah. Do you start from childhood, because basically you still have a woman has reproductive organs, so when do you start, right? So I'm just going to very generally say when someone is trying to conceive, preconception nutrition, or someone is in their reproductive years. Okay, now reproductive years, 18 to 45. That is kind of changing a little bit with all, assisted therapies and things like this, but now at the moment it's 18 to 45 years generally. Okay. So we now know, and there's a mountain of evidence to show that what we eat, our environment, as we were talking, our stress levels, how active we are, maybe as minimal activity or maybe overactivity of our body, does influence the health of the sperm. Okay. And I've said sperm there, not just, so males are included in that.
It's both sides.
Yes, both sides. Sperm, the egg, and also the endometrium lining, or the abdominal cavity, so where things are going to implant and where the baby will grow, right? So it impacts us because we know that nutrient deficiencies do impact the risk of miscarriage, for example, chromosomal abnormalities, time till actually falling pregnant, stillbirth outcomes, pregnancy complications. So it is actually really important to try and increase your nutrient intake to make sure that you're eating well before you conceive, and then also during pregnancy and whilst breastfeeding as well. And then that continues, because most people really want some people anyway want more than one baby. So that time in between pregnancies is also really important, because sometimes you can be depleted from the first one, or have health outcomes that came about, health considerations, and then that's going to influence the next baby.
Yep.
So it's actually a continuum.
Okay.
So that's really important. And so that impacts, how important the egg is from a female perspective, and how important the sperm is. And for sperm, it's more like concentration of sperm, motility. So how quick are they going? How can they travel the distance, basically?
Yeah.
And they're what we call morphology. So if you go into a microscope, is there the one head and the one tail, and is it all kind of looking as they should, or is there two tails or maybe two heads, which is not great, So there's those three parameters are also, from a sperm perspective, what we look at when looking at sperm health.
Okay.
And I wanted to highlight, because most people, I think, when they think about preconception and fertility nutrition, they think about females. We were talking about this just before we started.
Yeah.
And it is also about males, because it is pretty much 50-50 at the beginning when trying to conceive. But from my experience, when it comes to a preconception or fertility consult from a nutrition perspective, it's normally the woman who's coming in and that she's by herself.
Yeah.
I have tried to make couple packages to promote, the guy to come in, and sometimes they're really receptive and open to change. Sometimes when I kind of directly ask them and tell them that they need some input, they're a bit scared. But yeah, I just wanted to say it's really important, because what a male's lifestyle is just as important at the beginning as the female lifestyle to influence preconception fertility. Yeah.
It's good. I think it's a really beneficial thing for everyone to know that there is both sides that are really just as important. So what would exactly come into the idea of, like, with nutrition when it comes to preconception? What would the nutrition side really be looking into?
Yeah. So I think one of the main things even when you go to first of all, if you're thinking about trying to conceive, you should go to your GP. Okay.
Yeah.
Most people don't know about this, but there is actually a pre-consultation appointment that is recommended for people wanting to conceive to go. So you go in and you have a discussion with your GP, and there's kind of like blood tests that are done, and just general screenings, just discussion about your menstrual cycle, or there should be maybe some education about when you can try to conceive in the cycle, what this looking like. Even if someone's experiencing irregular cycles, or maybe there's pain or something, whatever, you should start to kind of have discussions. Now, infertility is defined officially as actively trying for 12 months without unprotected sex and not falling pregnant. Okay. So that is actually infertility. Some people try that they, eventually go to their GP and be like, hey, it's not working after at least 6 months. Okay. But it'd be lovely for everyone to go in and get a bit of a health checkup, and maybe start some supplements. I have a discussion with the GP before they even start to conceive. And normally that's about 3 months. Okay. So even supplementation for trying to conceive, and ideally minimum is iodine and folate, and iron in some people if they're low iron. And that should start at least about 3 months beforehand. Some packages on supplements say, 1 month, but we know the optimum is about 3 months.
Okay, so keep taking supplements
them for
and
at least.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're like, this is for people who are actually trying to conceive. Some, as I said, 0.5% of pregnancies are unplanned. So, but if you're thinking, I'm gonna, we want to try and conceive in August, then you probably should start in May. Trying to conceive, so 3 months beforehand, and go to see your GP then as well.
So how much of a lifestyle change would that be 3 months prior?
So I suppose, going back also linking into your last question, the lifestyle changes should be more like, trying to incorporate movement, but that's not something that you're going to absolutely make sure that you're being active, but you're not exhausting yourself. So sometimes I see people come in and they're doing heaps of spin classes, heaps of HIIT training. They're barely having any rest days, and they just go. And they love it. They love the adrenaline rush. And I love that too. Like I'm meeting them on that level. However, from a fertility perspective, movement is important, but we need to bring it back. Your body needs to rest. Your body needs to feel safe to conceive and build a human being, and have enough energy. So, being active, 3 to 4 times a week, maybe moderate activity, not where you're absolutely wasted by the end of it. And there are rest days. Okay. So some people need to take it back. Some people need to increase their physical activity. Okay. And then obviously this is not preconception, but once someone's pregnant, you don't want to start again. Whatever you've been doing in the last few months is what you continue during pregnancy with what you can take on. Okay, that's kind of what's recommended. Then from a nutrition perspective, it's highly, obviously I'm a dietitian, I'm going to say this, but it is highly recommended to see a dietitian before trying to conceive, because nutrition does, as I said, impact long-term outcomes of the birth, fetal development, but also the actual health outcomes long-term in the lifespan of that baby once they are born. Okay. So it's actually multi-generational impacts, because if you think about it, let's say I had a baby, I'm pregnant, I have a baby, the fetus is developing, but the fetus is also developing their ovaries and reproductive system. So it's actually I will be having an effect on, yes, my baby, but also their baby. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's actually multi-generational, goes down.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's really important. And so, specific nutrients that we look at are, as most people think about, is folate. Okay, so folate and iodine are normally what's recommended from GPs to have, at least, and they are really important for neural tube defects, and brain development and spinal cord development, and that is normally happening. Most of that actually happens within the first trimester, particularly within the first 4 to 6 weeks, and most people during that time don't even know that they're pregnant. So that's why it's really important to get the supplementation beforehand.
Okay.
Then there's also another one called choline, which I feel like is kind of at the moment coming to a bit more awareness from a general public perspective, but it is just as important as folate and iodine, and it also is very much important for brain development. Okay. It's not in a lot of supplements. It is becoming a bit more available in supplements, but the actual nutrient of choline is quite big, so it's hard to get it in a lot of supplements. Okay, but there are it is being manufactured a little bit more these days because there's a bit more awareness of it. Then there's also making sure that you have adequate iron. You don't want too much iron either, because that can have negative outcomes. There's also B12 and all the other range of B vitamins. Zinc is really important. For people with kind of pelvic pain or a history of endo or even PCOS, these types of things, these chronic underlying anti-inflammatory conditions, a lot of antioxidants are actually really important to help with safe growth of or implantation and growth of the fetus over time. So vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E, and adequate levels of vitamin D are actually really important as well, both for skeletal growth and brain development as well.
Okay.
Vitamin A gets a really bad rep with preconception and pregnancy because it can be a toxic nutrient if had too much. And yes, it has definitely negative health outcomes, and it's easy to go over. But it doesn't mean, you shouldn't really have any supplements of it, but it doesn't mean that vitamin A is bad,
Okay. Just be cautious of it.
Just be cautious of it. And there are some guidelines in the world that say, let's say you can have like a little piece of liver or liver pate or something that's fresh and, meets health safety standards once a month, for example, to meet if you need to. But that really depends on the country.
Yeah.
But I think vitamin A gets a bit bad rap, but it's still important.
Okay.
And then other things actually probably that are on the higher list, I should say, are like omega-3s and polyunsaturated fatty acids, because again, that's really important for brain development. So a lot of fish, nuts, seeds, these types of things are really important. And if someone can't get them in their supplements and they're not really having any fish, in their food and they're not having any fish, they should get them in supplementation form.
Okay. That's good because I don't like fish.
Yeah. And you can get them through supplements. Yeah, you can get them through supplements. So there's there's probably a top 5, but then there's other ones to consider. But obviously, this all very much depends on the person and where they're at from their nutrition status.
Yeah. So get a referral from a GP first.
Yeah, try and get. To be honest, you don't really need a referral from it to see a dietitian. You can be self-referred. However, referral would mean that you probably have a blood test happening, and that would help with time, and that helps a lot with from a dietitian's perspective to see, okay, you're lower or high in this certain thing, you know, or else these kind of other health issues are probably coming up. Let's address these first so you are going into pregnancy and increasing your chance of conceiving a healthy baby as much as we can.
Okay.
You know, so so that's that. And then other things to consider is what, you know, your actual dietary patterns and diet quality. So are you eating like heaps of animal products and there's like no plant-based proteins, or vice versa? You know, where are we at? What's your concentration of antioxidants like? How are you eating regularly? Are you having low blood sugars? Are you getting shaky, or are you just munching on food all the time? So there's just also those to consider, and then also relationship with food, and probably most people have other things to consider in terms of health conditions as well that impact their dietary recommendations. So you can see there's a few things to think about.
There's a lot of prep work. Like if you're going through a planned parenthood, there's a lot of the prep work that sort of needs to take place.
Yes.
In understanding.
Yes.
Even understanding. So it would be like sort of getting your body at a middle level where it's sort of like it's not too high, it's not too low.
Yep. You want it to be optimal for fertility. Yeah.
So 3 months is really important.
Yeah. 3 months
to that then. Okay.
And I mean, we have to note that if someone's going into this space, and maybe someone's going into the space for the first time, or they've had a really long fertility journey and it's actually really stressful, and now they're going into reproductive therapies, and sometimes it's not a very pleasant journey. You know, some people go in, oh, it's lovely, beautiful butterflies and having a baby is so lovely. Sometimes it doesn't go the way you plan it, and it can be really stressful, expensive. There's a lot of appointments, way longer than you thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a bummer, you know. So there's all this information that's given to you. I mean, even on the first appointment of your GP, you're like kind of, it can be a bit overwhelming. So then you're like, oh gosh, nutrition as well. But seeing a dietitian or an allied health professional that's appropriate to, even a physio, for example, if needed for whatever reason, they can be kind of a guide for you, you know, and kind of break down information that's relevant to you, that's evidence-based but easy to understand, and provide you with practical tips and recommendations to implement those things to meet your needs. And so, as you were saying at the beginning of the podcast, it can be really overwhelming to go see a health professional because it's like too much.
Yeah.
But actually when you go see them, you're like, oh, it's actually made it easier for me. It's broken down those steps. It's practical. I now know what to do because we have a plan. I'm not lost, you know. And those, if you see more than one health professional, they should all be working together and, you know, to accompany for each of their therapies. So I also encourage you, because you think it's going to make it harder because it's going to be, oh my God, it's overwhelming. But actually they should make it easier for you to implement things.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think especially with the idea of, okay, you have to go and actually talk to someone about different things that you're experiencing. I think especially if you know, because everyone knows their body quite well and you know when something's wrong with your body. But I think it's the idea of like taking that time to really try to figure out what's going on with your body. I think that's the main thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when it comes to, say, for example, like me being 26, I'm sort of like coming into the thought of looking into fertility just for myself. I'm just sort of interested in how my body would go with that. What would be the normal procedure for that to be looked at? So
just to confirm, you're thinking about having the 26, thinking about having kids or wanting to optimize your fertility?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of a funny one, isn't it? Because I mean, I came from a Catholic girls' school, which I'm glad I went to, but I was always told sex is bad and stay away from boys. So now, you know.
Same.
Yeah, so,
I grew up Muslim, so that's exactly how it is.
So sometimes even like, what is sex? When should you be conceiving? What does when should I have sex with my partner? When am I ovulating? What are the signs of ovulation? So I think these are all like the first step to wanting from a fertility perspective, or even understanding your body, to be like, what are the signs that I should be looking at, you know? So understanding your menstrual cycle, I think, is really important. Maybe tracking some things, knowing when the first day of your period is to the next day of your first day of your next period. That's your menstrual cycle length, for example. And normally halfway in between there, very average. It really depends on the person, and actually depends on the person and changes every month as well in the same person. You know, when you ovulate, but even like, you know, when you ovulate, your signs, the cervical mucus changes. It becomes a lot more like egg white, but then maybe just before your menstrual, before you start menstruating, it gets like dry, for example. And so there's different, depending on the phase of the menstrual cycle, there's different ways that the body communicates to you what it's doing. So being aware of that actually is really awesome, because you can be a bit more in touch with yourself, and you can be like, oh yeah, maybe this is why I'm feeling this way. Not to disencourage what you're feeling and not validate what you're feeling, you know, but it can, I mean, hormones do change, and they impact us, right? So even just understanding how that's going to influence you, even your energy levels, what type of exercise is best for you in the menstrual cycle is actually really important. So that's, I reckon, number one step. Okay. Then, as I said, going to see a GP, whether it's for fertility focus or just a general checkup, and get just have a discussion to say, I'm thinking about doing this either now or the next few years. What should I think about? Maybe even have, you know, if there's any kind of things to look at, maybe from a menstrual health perspective. Even thyroid is actually really important for fertility. So that should be checked normally. Your iron, your folate, B vitamins, for example, these types of things. Just have a general health checkup with a blood test and have a discussion with your GP to get that all sorted. And then like assessing, this is not nutrition related, but it does come up a lot, is your stress levels. So how are you? How is your stress? Like, what's going? Yeah.
And I think that really plays a part during the menstrual cycle for me as well. Like, there's the minute I can tell that I'm stressed, it changes. The time changes, everything changes. Everything's delayed about pretty much a week. So then there's that idea of, okay, because I have very high anxiety, and that kicks in very quickly. So I can easily just go from 0 to 100 just with 2 thoughts in my head that sort of come up. And so that affects my stress levels quite often, which makes it very difficult for me. And I have tracked the cycle before.
Oh, good.
But I think the tracking of the cycle is like very changing. And sometimes there's like a 2-week gap where it's like, that's not meant to happen yet. So like, I'm understanding it as I get older. Growing up in a culture that doesn't really speak about it that often is quite a huge change to having to figure it out yourself, which makes it even more difficult. But I think the people that I have around me, we all pretty much, I think we all have calendars for each other to make sure, because like we're all very able to talk about it, which makes it a great support group.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, as you're saying, Dina, like, tracking can also be anxiety provoking for some people, you know, because you're like, oh my God, I thought I was going to get my period today, but now I'm not. What's happening to me, or what's wrong, or whatever. It's important to know that there are definitely fluctuations in someone's period from month to month. Okay, no one ever really ovulates on the same day, and you can change in how long your cycle is, normally about 5 days or so. Medication, also if you're traveling, stress, anything like all these, you know, they change actually how our menstrual cycles. So trying to be aware of that. It's also really important I think it's important to use apps or these tracking things as an education tool, but not something to be like, okay, the app is telling me that I'm ovulating now, or the app is telling me that I need to have sex now, because most of them are very, very, very inaccurate. Whether they're paying or not paying. So it's more just about tracking it, but then actually being more aware, being connected to you. Because sometimes apps and all these tracking things, even, you know, sleep and all these watches or whatever, they remove you from connecting to your body. Right. So we need to reconnect. That's the whole thing. You want to reconnect. So have it as a tool, as a side tool, But don't forget to be aware of, as I said, what your body's telling you, how your changes are, how stressed you are, what signs and symptoms are you having. That's why like sometimes meditation, yoga, like I definitely recommend these to people to try and relax.
Yeah.
Do you need to see a psychologist or, other therapies that are going to help you to better connect with yourself and maybe deal with anything or better manage anxiety or any other conditions? I think that's actually really important.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that you're able to connect with your family, because what we know is what your mum experienced with pregnancy and her kind of fertility journey or family history is actually really important for you. So having conversations about, did you have miscarriages? Is there miscarriages in the family? Are there any kind of conditions, gynecological or women-related conditions that I need to know about that normally, as you said before, are like taboo.
Yeah.
But actually once you kind of start opening, like, yeah, this is that, your aunt experienced this or there's cousin. And it's like, oh, okay, there's fibroids in the family, there's endometriosis in the family, or yes, they had PCOS, or there's diabetes. Like there's all these, they should be kind of a conversation should be had, because they can all influence your awareness, and that's education as well. And
Okay. So some things can be sort of genetically
absolutely,
passed down. Okay.
100%, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
If there's and again, doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen, but if there's, let's say, miscarriages in the family history, you are at increased risk of miscarriage as well. And again, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have babies, but it might take a few more times to fall pregnant.
Okay.
And have a healthy baby. It might not, but it's just good to be aware. So that's what I would recommend. So awareness of your own body, stress reduction and tools to help reduce stress, GP assessment and conversation with the family.
Okay. All right. I'll make sure that that's sort of like something to look into. I think there's so much different types of information that goes along whenever you're searching things up or whenever you hear about it on social media. So the best thing, I think, from what I'm hearing, is just go straight to the source, just go straight to
exactly.
a GP whenever you think that there is something there. I think like what runs in my family is hypochondria. So that's probably a big thing to it as well. It doesn't happen so much with me, but it has happened a lot with my mum. So there is that level of stress that sort of comes up, anything health-wise, which is also pretty anxiety inducing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's a lot of growth when it comes to that and sort of figuring that out. But I did want to know, what role does a lifestyle such as including exercise and stress management like we talked about, how does that play in supporting fertility through to nutrition?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of similar to what we just discussed, but you want the body to be at its optimum to allow for a new life to take place, right?
Okay.
So from a nutrition, from an exercise perspective, you don't want to be, in people who maybe are under eating or exercising too much, people can lose their period, called hypothalamic amenorrhea. And so your body basically is so malnourished, whether you're under eating or over exercising, that your body shuts down on the reproductive side of things just to survive every day. And so obviously that's going to affect fertility, right? So making sure that there's a balance there. But making sure that you're moving to allow for good blood sugar levels, mental health, kind of stress reduction, these types of things, keeping up muscle mass, etc. In a healthy way that your body can cope. Then there's also nutrition. So the nutrition, what you eat is all going to help with, from a female perspective, the best thing. There's a lot of things on social media say, eat these nutrients, or good nutrition is going to optimize your egg health, or it's going to improve your egg health. Okay. You can't actually improve your egg health. Okay. So we, as females, we are born with eggs and then over time we lose them. Okay. What we can do with our nutrition and stress is we can reduce the aging of those eggs. So that's the reason. So eggs age and become maybe less quote unquote healthy as we age. That happens, that starts to decline after 30, really takes a plummet after 35. People can still conceive after 35, but you definitely need there's definitely an increased risk of needing assisted reproductive therapies after it. Not everyone needs it, but that's kind of very broad.
Yeah.
So from a nutrition perspective, we can help to reduce the degradation and optimize the health, but you can't make them healthier, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Whatever they are at that point in time is where we're trying to keep them at.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. So from nutrition, it's all about antioxidants, for example. So making sure that antioxidants are really important. Too much of them can be bad. Not enough it can be bad too. Oxidants are really important. So oxygen radicals that kind of come in and destroy certain cells. So not all cells are healthy, which is a good thing, but sometimes they can also destroy the cells that we want, including like the eggs, for example, right?
Okay.
So antioxidants are going to keep the egg, or even once the egg and the sperm come together and it's kind of implanting, keep it from degrading and allowing it to kind of provide a safe space for it to implant and grow. Okay, because sometimes if there's too many oxidants in the abdominal cavity and around the endometrium lining, which is where the implantation takes place, it can be attacked basically.
Okay.
And then some people don't even realize that they're pregnant because it happens so early on that they just think it's their period, or a miscarriage can take place later on. Okay. And normally that happens around the most time it happens around first trimester, which is why most people try not to tell people that they're pregnant after, before 12 weeks most of the time.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's one thing. Another thing is make sure that you have enough, iron, for example, in your body to allow for the changes to take place.
Yeah.
You want the endometrium lining itself, so that's the lining where implantation takes place, to be full of nutrition, healthy blood. So again, it can grow and provide enough energy and nutrients, zinc, choline, B vitamins, all this to flourish, folate to flourish. We also then once implantation takes place and the cells start to divide and there is growth, that happens in a healthy way. So sometimes miscarriage, and this is the most common reason for miscarriage, is that there's a chromosomal abnormality. Okay. And that can be from the DNA of the sperm, the DNA of the egg, or just the way that the replication of the cells is taking place. And so by eating well and reducing our stress, first of all, improves the DNA of both the sperm and the ovum of the egg, but it also helps to allow for healthy kind of splitting and increasing of the cells and growth.
Okay.
So reduces risk of miscarriage. It also helps to reduce the risk of genetic conditions, so of baby being born with certain conditions as well. We also now know that there are certain nutrients that have been associated with increasing the risk of like autism, for example, ADHD, based on the maternal diet.
Okay.
Like caffeine, for example, or iron, vitamin D, they're ones that have been associated with increased risk of those conditions. So that's kind of the reason why you want to try and optimize and how nutrition can help with conception as well. So then there's also obviously this from a sperm perspective. It's all, as I was saying before, it's all about motility, concentration, and morphology. And that helps to whether the sperm can actually meet the egg, for example, that happens. Yeah. If, as I said, the DNA is at its best. And then from there, really, it's more from a maternal perspective. So at the beginning is the male and the female, and then the female has more impact. And then as the fetus grows, it's also important from a nutrition perspective to help, it helps to reduce the risk of, for example, gestational diabetes, especially if you have it in the family. Some people, they're moving really well, they're stressed, they're not really that stressed, and they're eating perfectly and they still get gestational diabetes. So having GDM doesn't mean that you failed or it's your fault. Okay, but it can help reduce risk in certain populations, and that it's a normal thing. So as you go through pregnancy, what happens is your body naturally becomes more insulin resistant as your pregnancy goes on to allow for the growth. Yeah, and that sometimes that insulin resistance can lead to diabetes ranges, and when that happens, the control of the insulin and blood sugar levels needs to be actually quite controlled, much more strict than if someone had type 1 or type 2, for example. Okay. And then once that person has the baby, that GDM goes away, but then that person is at an increased risk of diabetes in the future. Okay. Yeah, so hope I summarized that.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. I think you can't really summarize that any shorter. Because there's a lot that sort of goes into it, and a lot that really takes place when even just discussing with a GP, even just saying, I'm trying to get pregnant, what can I do? That's already going to start so many things that you're going to have to start looking out for.
Absolutely.
And you'll notice a lot more. So I'm going to notice a whole lot more now that I'm looking at it, like the amount of iron I probably should be taking, and zinc I probably should be taking as well. But like the normal vitamins that sort of take place that everyday people should really look into. That you don't really hear until someone says that they're sick, and then it's like, oh, you should take vitamins. Vitamins are important.
Yeah. And I mean, vitamins are important, but food is the best, you know, from how nothing in a lab is going to replicate the matrix of the nutrients in the food and how it's digested. That's just not possible. Same with having probiotics and prebiotics, which is the fiber and the food for the probiotics. Nothing is going to take it from a capsule. The best is to have it through food, but supplementation normally is needed. Another thing I'd say from your last question, sorry, Dina, is brain development is really important. So what you eat early on, particularly. So as I said, polyunsaturated fatty acids like omega-3 and omega-6, folate, iodine, choline, that helps a lot with brain development and the health of the body, the baby's brain, even after they're born and for the rest of their life. Onset of mental health conditions or the risk of those are actually really influenced by it. So, you know, people fall pregnant all the time, and they come from all different backgrounds, and their lifestyle circumstances are all very different. And some people really try to fall pregnant. Others absolutely just see someone and they fall pregnant, you know. So some people don't even think about doing anything and they fall pregnant and they're in pregnancy. And obviously they have a healthy baby. However, I suppose the main aim, as we were saying before, is you want to thrive, not survive. So you want to really do as much as you can for your body going forward to helping to put a life together, as well as the life that you're making and increase the best chance that they have to having good health outcomes in the years that they have on this earth, you know, so and their children as well. So
exactly, it sort of becomes, you're not only thinking about being a parent, you're thinking about being a grandparent.
Which is crazy. Yeah,
and it's just that you're starting a whole chain and trying to. Because I know for me, when I talk to my mum quite a lot when it comes to how I was born and things, and the diet that she had was very much a culture-based diet, which was a lot of rich foods.
How beautiful.
It was just a lot of stuff that she probably shouldn't be having while she was pregnant. And when she had my sister, she had a midwife that literally was like, veggies, make sure you have veggies, make sure everything was like very clean focused. Nothing that was really like a lot of sauces, a lot of really spiced stuff that you shouldn't really be having. And the outcome that was different, her recovery, I think she talks about her recovery as well with me, is the fact that her recovery was a lot longer for me and her recovery is a bit shorter.
Isn't it? Yeah.
So it's amazing how the different circumstances sort of come into play. And I definitely know we're not going to talk about that because that could be even longer. But yeah, it's just, I talk to her often, especially now that I'm getting older and now I can understand it. It's not just a story that she tells anymore. Now it's like pretty much what my life is going to be looking like. So, and she had, when she was early 20s, so she was 21 and dealing with that in a different country as well.
Wow.
So
yep.
without that support,
absolutely, absolutely. And I think I love that you said like the age, right? So I'm sure everyone's realizing, but as time goes on, we all know that the time of onset of our first baby in women is getting older and older, and that's because of different circumstances, life changes, work opportunities, all these travel, all these things, education, which are all extremely important. From a natural biological perspective, however, our body is definitely more primed to have a baby, you know, early 20s, I'd say, you know, mid 20s, compared to starting at 30, 35, maybe 40, you know, and it does become harder to have a baby. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have a healthy pregnancy, but it might be just a little bit harder to recover. Let's say you'll have the energy to take care of the baby after pregnancy compared to when you're older. So what you do from a nutrition perspective and also the support systems they have around you also actually become even more important around them, because as you said, it can impact recovery as well. So that also needs to be considered, I think. So nutrition becomes even more important as our society changes, actually.
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely something that more people are being aware of as well. I think definitely a lot of my friends, they're like, it's not just people telling them their time ticking, clock's ticking, but it's also like themselves being like, I know that I'm probably ready now. Like you know your body, and it's like, okay, it feels like it's ready. The timing feels right for them, and yeah, I have conversations with this pretty much daily with a bunch of my friends because everyone's always on a different timeline. But as you get older, you sort of connect, being like, okay, it feels like I'm in a space career wise. I'm in a space where I can do that. Either one, they just haven't found the right person to go through that with, or they're not in a situation where they can sort of financially take on the
there's so many
responsibility.
considerations, isn't it? Yeah.
It's mainly the guy thing, but we won't.
Well, I think the important thing is you have to be again, sometimes you're not mentally ready, and even if you're mentally ready, you think you are, and then you fall pregnant, you're like, But that mental kind of readiness, I think, is so important because, you might be financially okay, you might be with a partner, but you're like, oh, am I actually ready to do this?
Exactly.
And have you had that conversation? Did you have that support team? And sometimes you might not, and it just happens, and that's just life, isn't it? But I know from my perspective, when I was quote unquote prime, I would think about it. I mean, even get married and I'd be like, oh my God. And I'd literally have like my heart would start beating, and looking back now, I was like, oh, I'm just not ready for it, you know? But after a few years, I was like, oh, actually, yeah, that's fine. I didn't have those maybe biological sensations when I thought about it anymore. So I was like, oh, actually, I think I'm ready. I think it's okay if it happens now. I don't think I'll ever be ready. And I don't think everyone is ever ready, do you know?
No.
But I'm more ready maybe now.
Yeah. I think like also the mentally as well is a big thing to take on the responsibility. Like for me, the fear of like, I have to I'm taking responsibility for my sister half the time. Like, and I have an argument with her. Taking responsibility of a child right now is probably the scariest thought to my head. But yeah, I think everyone has their own time as well, which is really important. Now this leads us really perfectly well into the open mic section of the show.
Yeah.
Now this gives you a chance to talk about anything that you are passionate about, or maybe something that we didn't get to speak about so much throughout the show. I know we spoke about so many different areas, but if there's anything that we missed, or this gives you a chance to also talk about Womanly if you want to sort of discuss that a little bit more as well.
Well, okay, so I'll talk about two things. First of all, if someone wants to come and see me, they're thinking about trying to have a baby, maybe they are pregnant or they're breastfeeding. I support women during that time. Also, if people are thinking, I have pelvic pain, or I'm thinking about maybe possibly I have endometriosis, or my periods are seriously irregular, or I have a bad relationship with food, or I just want to get a checkup and see where I am. I help women with their improving the quality of life through lifestyle management, predominantly through nutrition for all these things. At Womanly Nutrition and Dietetics, I work with people, to be honest, everywhere online. And I also see people in person. I'm at Sunshine Private, and I've just opened at Eltham. But yeah, mostly I see people online, and that's just www.womanlynd.com. I've also got Instagram, womanly_ND. I think that's all I do. There's Facebook as well, but that's all. Too many social platforms otherwise. So that's that. And there's also a couple of other people that work with Womanly, and they have their own specialties in the same area, and they're also highly qualified and lovely. And yeah, if you have any questions, people can reach out. Absolutely. Another random topic. Well, maybe not that random, but I suppose I just really, every time I ask to do this, it's not really that random. It's still very much related. But if people, don't be afraid. If you have questions about your health, if you are unsure, if you've never had a regular cycle, if you've always been on oral contraceptive pills and you never knew what your cycle looked like, and you want to have conversations with your GP, do go to your GP. Really encourage you to take that step. I can't encourage you enough to look into that. It's so important for you both now and in the future. Even post-menopause, it does affect your health then. And it's not bad to go on oral contraceptives because I get a lot of people telling me, I don't want to go on oral contraceptives. Some people do need that. However, I do see a lot of people as well who just have no idea what their menstrual cycle is like. And they've been on oral contraceptives for 10, 20 plus years and they had problems beforehand. And now they have no idea what their cycle will look like. And so having a conversation with someone that you trust, even if you have to go through a few GPs to get there, do persist, be your own boss in terms of your health, be a bit more forceful if you need to, have those tough conversations and advocate for yourself. I think I'm just really passionate about that. Advocate for yourself. The health system here in Australia is wonderful, but it is also, there's a lot of people here and health professionals can be overwhelmed and with limited time. So you do need to advocate for yourself and do keep on kind of make some noise basically, and do try and see if definitely if you're trying to conceive, you definitely do need about at least 6 months of oral contraceptives for hormones to kind of taper off and everything to balance out, and to see what your menstrual cycle is actually like, and to deal with whatever might have been masked or better regulated with those. So because it happens quite a lot, and then people get kind of shocked, or it doesn't happen the way that they think it was going to happen. And so doing that as early on as you can is best. You want that time. You need that time actually. So we didn't talk about that, but advocacy and knowing what your menstrual cycle is like, having those conversations, seeing a gynecologist, a women's health GP, or, trying over and over again and getting a second, third, fourth opinion from another GP is actually really needed.
Okay. And you have to go through a few GPs to figure out which one also converses well to you as well. I know I've had to go through that when I was younger, trying to find the multitude of ones that actually, like, when they were explaining it to me, I completely understood what they were saying.
Yes. Yeah.
And they were saying it in terms of, okay, this is what you need to do, not just like you have this, and this and this. So like trying to find ones that suit also your own way of speaking.
Yeah. I mean, when you meet someone in person all the time in life, you're not going to gel with everyone. It's just like impossible.
Exactly.
So you can't, it's just same with someone's healthcare professional relationship. Some people you'll gel with and you'll get on really well, and other people, they just speak a different language to you, or there's just something that you can't put your foot in. It's like, it's probably not going to work that well for me. You know what I mean? So some people really like people direct. Some people like who are a bit more emotional. It just depends on who you like. Obviously, you want to be heard and you want to be validated. And so it's really important too. Another thing, not random, but just kind of slightly connected, is that whether we're talking about fertility or just general nutrition, always get it from someone who's evidence-based and you feel comfortable with. But just remember that food does not have value, okay? So chocolate is just as important as salad leaves. It's just that, chips can be just as important as carrots. There should be no moral value or guilt around eating, whether you're trying to fall pregnant, whatever is happening in your life. People do emotionally eat. It's actually a normal coping mechanism, as long as you have other tools in the kit to also help you with emotional regulation. It's totally normal and healthy. I think that's just because that's really not what's promoted in society. And so so many people that I work with have, they feel guilty and like, I did really bad today, or this is bad. It's like, why is this bad?
Yeah.
So I just want to highlight that from a dietitian, it's okay to have chocolate and chips and crisps. And they might not be quote unquote under fertility foods. However, they also provide some nutritional value. And all food is part of a healthy diet, in its own way. So I just would like to end with that.
Yeah, no, that's great last words. I think that's also very relieving to hear as well, especially coming from a dietitian, someone who has studied this, not us Googling off the internet, is that okay to eat?
Yeah.
Because I think it's so much better when it is from someone who has that experience, who has studied it, rather than, and that's the whole point of this show, I feel, is to promote people who have studied these topics for the number of years that they have in order to talk to the general public. And I think that's what a lot of people are forgetting, is the fact that we have to also say it in a way that is not fearful to other people, is not that does sort of allow the fact that lifestyles can sort of have a setback or can have like different changes.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And we do forget that. I think we forget that when having those lists of things that we need to get done.
Yes.
And then suddenly we're like, yeah, but I don't feel like doing
That's
that
right,
today.
yeah,
And that's
yeah.
okay.
And that's okay. And it's okay if you have to go something from a can or you need to reheat something. Like it's all good, you know, like you don't have to make some amazing dish. Things that are normally the things that are most simple that you make at home, baked beans on toast with some cheese.
Yum.
Are the best.
Yes.
You know, like they are so nutritious. They don't have to be super fancy Instagram worthy or anything like that.
Yeah. I'm just glad you can't hear my stomach grumbling.
I'm also really hungry actually, to be honest. So yeah.
Well, I think that's the perfect way to end it and perfect way to sort of sum up what we're talking about today. I mean, we've covered so many different areas, from couples going through the process, from individuals just wanting to know a little bit more about their bodies. And thank you so much, Stephanie, for coming on to the show and talking about this. And I think answering a lot of questions that I had even about different types of fertility, different types of nutrition that sort of we're meant to be aware of at least. And I think the awareness is exactly what we're trying to promote on the show. So I'm really glad that you were able to join us.
Thank you. Thank you for even having the podcast. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for taking the word out. And just remember, about 50% of people don't actually know what they need to eat for pregnancy in Australia. So you are not alone. Seek some help. Seek people who know what they're talking about. Have your support network, and all the best with the future. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll see you all in the next episode.
You've been listening to On the House, produced by the Household Management Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at hm.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Yastra. Thanks for tuning in.